Hello everybody, my name is Ilya.
And my name is Tyler. Together we make up Kovray, a couple that loves to play board games.
And today we'll be teaching you...
knitting circle.
A calico game.
Yay.
With our calico shirts.
Calico
cats.
Knitting circle is designed by Emily Vincent. Its art is done by Beth Sobel, and it's from the folks at Flat Out Games who helped sponsor this video.
Let's head on over to the table and learn how to play this cozy game. As always, you'll begin by setting up. First, each player will receive a player board and 2 knitting needles tokens. You'll then place all of the yarn tiles into the bag and shuffle thoroughly. You'll place the central knitting circle board based on your player count in the middle of the table, placing a corresponding cat token for each player on each starting space. The player whose cat ends up on the star will receive the first player token. You'll then remove 6 yarn tiles, one of each color from the bag, and place them in the center of the central knitting circle board. These will track the 6 rounds for the game. You'll continue by placing 2 yarn tiles next to each of the spaces of the central knitting circle board, ensuring they match the orientation on the board, a knit or a purl. Each player will then receive 2 yarn tiles from the bag. You'll place these in your personal yarn bowl. The orientation does not matter, as you can choose the orientation of tiles in your personal yarn bowl. You'll then shuffle and create piles of buttons in the central area, giving each player 2 of each, which you'll place face up on your player board. You'll form a Grabby Paw token pile and an ugly garment button pile. Each player will receive a Grabby Paw token at the start of the game. Finally, you'll shuffle each of the 6 decks of garment cards and place them in stacks within reach of all players. Each player will choose 1 garment and draw 2 cards of that type. You'll choose 1 to keep, which you'll place to the left of your board, placing the knitting needles token on the top. The card you did not choose will go to the bottom of the garment card deck. Now, as a tip, you'll want to choose one of the garments that matches your buttons, as you'll be able to get more points this way. You're now ready to play. At the start of each round, the first player will choose one of the 6 tiles in the central knitting circle board and add it to any yarn spot around the circle, replacing another yarn tile. The replaced tile will go back into the bag. The round can now begin. Knitting circle is played in 6 rounds, with each round having a yarn drafting phase, which you'll take in turns, and a crafting phase, which all players will do simultaneously. Let's go over them. In the yarn drafting phase, you'll take turns moving your cat token and acquiring yarn tokens to add to your player board. You'll move your cat 1 or 2 spaces in the clockwise direction around the board. You'll skip over any spaces with other cats or spaces with no tiles present. Now, once you've landed on a space, you'll take a tile adjacent to the location. You can select either tile if there's 2 present. You'll place the tile you've selected onto your player board, keeping the orientation of the tile, either knit or purl. Play then passes to the next player. You'll keep doing this until each player has drafted exactly 4 yarn tiles. It is now the crafting phase. In the crafting phase, all players will simultaneously carry out actions. Here are all the things that you can do. Start a garment. You'll discard a yarn tile matching the color of the garment you wish to start. You'll then draw 2 garments of that type and choose 1 to keep, placing the other at the bottom of the corresponding garment deck. Now, in order to do this, you must have a free knitting needles token available. If you do not, you cannot start a garment. So after you have drafted a card, you'll place the knitting needles token at top of it to signify that you're now working on it. How do you work on it? Well, you knit. To knit, you'll take any available yarn tile and place it onto the space of one of the garments you're working on. These are garments with the knitting needle tokens. The tiles must be placed in the correct orientation on the garment, either knit or purl as indicated on the card, and must be completed in order, top to bottom. Now, the yarn tokens from the top of your player board have to retain their orientation. However, any yarn in your personal yarn bowl, you're free to flip into any orientation before placing on the garments. Now, when placing a yarn tile into a space that grants you a Grabby Paw or an additional tile, you'll simply take that from the supply or draw a random tile from the bag and place them in the corresponding space on your player board. These can be used immediately. What do Grabby Paws do? Well, you can trade 1 into the supply to select any yarn tile from the bag and place it into your personal yarn bowl. This is helpful when you need a specific color. Now let's go back to orientation. Say you don't like how one of your tiles is oriented at the top of your board. Well, you have 2 choices. You can take a flip yarn action, discard 1 yarn tile to the bag to flip the orientation of any other yarn tile on your player board. Or you can wait until the end of the turn, as you will have the ability to keep 2 yarn tiles in your personal yarn bowl for the next round. And, as we mentioned earlier, tiles in your personal yarn bowl can be used in either orientation when placing. Let's talk about completing a garment. When you've filled all the mandatory spaces on the garment card, you may complete it. The mandatory spaces are denoted by the lighter color on the top. But as you can see, non-mandatory spaces often provide more points and even bonuses, so make your decisions wisely, as you will not be able to return to the garment once you choose to finish it. Now after completion, you'll first check if you receive any immediate rewards at the bottom of the card. You'll then check to see if your garment has met any button criteria on your player board. You may only have one of each of the 3 button tokens adjacent to each garment. Now if you meet the criteria for both of the same button type, you'll choose which to take. The circle buttons focus on color. If that color or colors are present on your garment, you're eligible to take the button. The square buttons take a look at the garment type. If you've completed the garment depicted on the button, you'll be able to take that button. And lastly, the triangles are patterns. You'll need to have completed a specific pattern to take the triangle buttons. Now you can find the descriptions of the patterns on your player board, but let's quickly run through them. Stripes alternate 2 colors, and a minimum length must be 3. A color block must have all colors in blocks of at least 2 yarn tiles, which means a minimum length of 4. A solid pattern must be a garment all of one color, with a minimum length of 3. And finally, symmetrical patterns must read the same from the top as they do from the bottom. The minimum length for this pattern is 4. An important note here is that in order for this garment to be classified as symmetrical, it cannot be a solid or a stripe, as those garments would be categorized as either solids or stripes instead of symmetrical. Now the last step of completing a garment, you'll check to see if you've completed any pattern of the ones we've just listed. Now you don't need to have the button to show that you've done this. You simply just have to have a pattern present on your garment. If you do not, your garment will be classified as ugly, and you'll receive an ugly garment button, which will deduct 3 points from your final score at the end of the game. And that's the crafting phase. You'll play until you're satisfied with your actions, you wait for everyone else to do the same, and proceed to the round end actions. Now at round end, you'll first have the opportunity to transfer any unplaced yarn tiles from the slots on top of your player board to your personal yarn bowl. As a reminder, you may only keep 2 yarn tiles in your personal yarn bowl for the next round. You'll then refill the workspace on your player board with new button tokens, randomly drawing them from the corresponding piles. You'll always have 6 buttons at the start of each round. Then, starting with the space containing the CAD of the starting player, you'll refill all the open yarn spaces, randomly drawing yarn tiles from the bag going clockwise. Remember to make sure the pattern lines up to the spaces. Finally, you'll pass the first player marker and you're now ready to start a new round, with the player choosing a tile from the center and replacing a tile from the circle back to the bag. You'll keep playing, drafting yarn tiles and completing garments until the end of the 6th round. At this point, you're now ready to score. The first thing you'll do is remove any incomplete garments, return them to the draw pile, and any yarn tiles back to the bag. These will not score you any points. You'll first score buttons, tallying the value on all completed buttons on garments. You'll then add up the points from the garments themselves. Now, you'll add up the points from each of the garment bonuses at the bottom of each garment. These apply to all garments. Finally, you'll deduct 3 points for every ugly garment button you have. You'll compare the scores, and the player with the most points wins. Are you ready for an advanced game? At the start of the game, you'll shuffle the request cards and deal 4 to the center of the play area, Grabby Paw bonus side up. These are goals you can strive for during the game. Now if you're the first player to complete the goal, you'll receive a Grabby Paw in addition to the points at the end of the game. Multiple players can receive the Grabby Paw if they've completed the goal the same round. At the end of the game, you'll add up the points from all the goals you've completed.
And that's Knitting Circle.
How many pairs of long johns are you gonna knit?
How many do you need?
At least 3.
It's coming on the winter season soon.
If I could knit, I would knit every day. Maybe you could
No,
crochet.
I crochet, which is kind of like knitting, but it's not the same. Which brings us to our question of the day. If you could make anything, maybe it be from knitting or crocheting or sewing, what would it be? Just like real quick, real fast, and you'd be able to like wear it that day.
Probably a little hat.
Yeah.
A cute little hat.
Mitts would be fun too.
Mitts would also be good. Now, if you have any questions or if you want to learn more about this game, it is coming to crowdfunding, or it already may be there. So just check out the description down below. You'll learn more about the game, see all of it in its glory. And, of course, we can also chat with you in the comments because we love to do that too.
Exactly. If you have any questions, let us know down below. Until next time, though, stay cozy, and we will see you in the next one. Bye.
Bye.